Shalom, I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and welcome to this edition of Revealing Prophecy. Each week we connect the dots of the news from around the globe with biblical prophecy and talk about what was, what is, and what is to come. The monologue is our original work, and all other articles are used, giving credit to their respective sources. We invite you to visit ignitinganation.com for a full roster of daily interviews, and we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter and YouTube channel so you never have to miss out on any of our special offers and events. Here's a quick look at what we'll be covering on today's show. I'll be giving you my opening monologue, then we'll cut to a story on Erdogan's summit with Putin shall ring alarm bells for NATO. Our next story, IDF chief warns precarious security situation in the north could lead to conflict. And finally, Russia steps up its presence in northeast Syria after the Turkey deal. You know, we always open with a fundamental truth, and that is the Bible comprises approximately 2,500 prophecies, of which around 2,000 have been fulfilled. Given that the Bible proves so reliable a document, there's every reason to expect that the remaining 500 prophecies, those slated for the time of the end, also will be fulfilled to the last letter. Who can afford to ignore these coming events, much less miss out on the immeasurable blessings offered to anyone and everyone who submits to the control of the Bible's author, God Himself? Would a reasonable person take lightly God's warning of judgment for those who reject what they know to be true about Jesus and the Bible, or who reject Jesus' claim on their lives? Over the course of the past 23 years of my walk with the Lord, I've built a reputation for being a strong biblicist. What's that really mean? It means that after living in the secular world and conforming to the standards of this world, I have reset my plumb line to line up with God's Word. It appears that's becoming an increasingly unpopular position. However, I am more interested in both my own and your eternal destination than I am popularity with the world. Here is what God says, and it's no coincidence that I chose today, October 31st, Halloween, to deliver this message. Isaiah 5:20, Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. This message is directed to both those believers who celebrate Halloween or those who participate in its equally dangerous counterfeit of the counterfeit, and that is trunk or treat. On Monday, I interviewed Kathy DeGraw, who at the request of Charisma Magazine and Charisma Publishing wrote an ebook entitled Why Christians Shouldn't Celebrate Halloween. Have we really decayed so much that we do not recognize the demonic connection between the glorification of evil and Halloween, that we need a book that gives us reasons to resist evil? Apparently so, since there are now more registered witches than there are Presbyterians. We need to examine the message that we, as the body of Messiah, are sending to the rest of the non-believing world. What if our embracing of these celebrations are at the root of the staggering number of children being treated for anxiety disorders, or the 10-year plus increase in teen suicides? If you thought for one moment that your participation in Halloween or Halloween alternatives have contributed to the loss of even one life, would you stop and swallow the bitter pill of reality that the marketing of evil in America today is a multi-billion-dollar industry? We have become an adrenaline rush, fear-fed society that flocks to horror movies and haunted houses and makes no connection whatsoever to the spiritual gateways that we have opened into the lives of those we say we love the most. As believers, we have taken such a cavalier attitude that we no longer even are bothered by graphic images and stories of vampires, zombies, demons, monsters, and those very characters that depict the flesh and blood that we do not war against, but they are the epitome of the natural reflection of Paul's words that we know address spiritual warfare. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Have we so forgotten the earliest prophecy of Scripture in Genesis 3:15, where we read, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." We know the seed of the woman is Jesus, but we never talk about the seed of the serpent, the Antichrist. Where do you think Satan and his fallen angels are right now? Yes, some are bound until they are released to torment men, but the remainder are the demons that are attacking the very souls of our youth, corrupting the moral compass of the church and destroying young lives through suicide, alcohol, drugs, pornography, anxiety, depression, night terrors, ADD, ADHD, and the list goes on and on. If you knew you had the key to safeguard your child, would you not use it? Of course you would. Then why do you not see what the Christian Post just released, entitled Hell Houses, Trunk or Treat, Reformation Day, 5 ways churches are recognizing Halloween this year? There's Reformation Day, innocent enough remembering Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to his door, but who is in his later days subscribed to vile anti-Semitism, so much so that Adolf Hitler quoted him as part of his justification for eliminating the Jewish people from the face of the earth. Nothing demonic to see here. While some churches and preachers adamantly oppose observing Halloween, many congregations embrace celebrations that have certain aspects of the holiday. Fellowship Church, a mega church based in Grapevine, Texas, and headed by Pastor Ed Young, held a Super Sweet Sunday event on Sunday. Super Sweet Sunday is an incredibly family-friendly extravaganza where indoor trick-or-treating, bounce houses, theatrical character-based teaching, and a message from Pastor Ed Young suited for both children and parents explained an announcement by the church on Facebook. I'm sorry, but there's no firm stand against evil and the symbolism of the glorification of the demonic. It just brings it into the 4 walls of the church and includes trick-or-treating. Some churches, among them Tyler Metro Church in Texas, use the spooky season to showcase some disturbing scenes about sin and damnation. For the past 28 years, Tyler has overseen a hell house every October. Carisha Fisher, worship pastor at Tyler, told Christian Post that they usually get between 3,000 to 5,000 guests every year, usually with the same series of scenes. We still have 2 abortion scenes, suicide, car wrecked with texting, porn addiction scenes, domestic abuse. Then they go down the elevator and into hell. Then they go into heaven, and there are the 3 different scenes in heaven, explained Fisher. What? Are you serious? A haunted house inside the church using abortion scenes, suicide, and an experience in hell that is standing firm and not conforming to this world? To make it even better, they're quoted as saying, "This year we added 2 scenes of how the enemy can twist your mind and get you into things such as witchcraft without you even being aware." Where in the Bible does it say to immerse your child in evil so they can become more discerning? But it gets even worse. While probably not as intentionally disturbing as a hell house, there are churches and ministries that create events centered on mazes for the Halloween time. Momentum Church, a congregation founded in 2013 and based in Van Buren, Arkansas, will hold a Halloween maze event on Wednesday featuring both recreational events and a charity effort. All free for the community, free food and fun. We'll be giving away food boxes for family in need, noted the church's Facebook event page. We will also have a giant maze for the kids to walk through and grab some candy on their way. Drinks and hot dogs for everyone there. Invite someone. Hope to see you there. For a time, the Rock Student Ministries at McLean Bible Church of Vienna, Virginia, hosted a terror maze for teenagers that features scary images, but also a gospel witness. Kelsey Herrera, spokesman from the Rock Student Ministry, told Christian Post in a 2012 interview that the main purpose was to clearly share the gospel with the 6 to 12 graders who go through the maze. This is the only reason we host the event, or any event here at the Rock, to have the opportunity to tell students about the person and work of Jesus Christ. A commonly observed celebration tied to Halloween that many churches in the United States observe is trunk or treat. This particular observance involves the usual Halloween customs of costumes and handing out candy to children with the trunks of cars in places of houses. Church of the Resurrection, a United Methodist megachurch based in Kansas City, had trunk-or-treat events at 4 of their 5 Kansas City area campuses with around 6,000 participants. Church of the Resurrection spokesperson Kathy Bean described the event as family-friendly, safe, and fun, as well as a good way to reach out to neighbors and friends. Members decorate the trunks of their cars with different themes, and the children go trick-or-treating from car to car. The church also provides fall crafts and treats for the children. Bean said, "We approach this as an opportunity for our congregation to enjoy fellowship together and to reach out and welcome families who may not have a church home. The church is now bringing Halloween and the counterfeit onto the very property that once was considered holy ground. We've compromised so much for the sake of tolerance and acceptance that we now reject the very foundation of the Bible and are not the light that overcome the darkness. We have become the darkness. Our numbers are falling. Our kids are rejecting the hypocrisy and irrelevance of the mixed message, and Jesus has been reduced from Messiah, Lord of Lords and King of Kings, to our good buddy who we think is going to show up and turn these atrocities into deep biblical teachings. If you as a Christian are not standing against evil, you are standing for it. You pastors and church leaders who do not preach against your congregants participating in this present evil, then your hands are stained with the same blood of that scared-to-death teenager who was traumatized by Halloween. My own 30-year-old daughter still shudders at the remembrance of a figure in a rocking chair in the front yard of a neighbor's home when what we thought was a lifeless stuffed scarecrow jumped up and ran toward her as we walked by. She was 4 years old and still has night terrors with that vision in every nightmare she's ever had since she was traumatized by that event. I was not a believer then, but as much as I know God has forgiven me, I will never forget the petrified, shaken little girl that I so loved, shaking and crying and begging me not to turn the lights out in her room. Church, it's time to remember God's word that says friendship with the world is hatred towards God. You cannot love God and embrace evil at the same time. You cannot glorify the life, death, and resurrection and glorify the evil of the one who comes to lie, kill, and destroy. I stand with God when he says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." Jesus said you are either for him or against him. What you do next will determine which side you are on. And that, my friend, concludes today's monologue. Our first story, Erdogan's summit with Putin should ring alarm bells for NATO, contributed by Con Coughlin. With Turkey seemingly intent on forging an ever closer relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the time has come to give serious consideration to Ankara's continued membership of the NATO alliance. When the Turks first became members of NATO back in 1952, it was because their country was seen as a vital bulwark against the Soviet Union. Having Turkey in NATO meant it was easier to monitor the activities of the Soviet Black Sea Fleet and limit Moscow's ability to spread its tentacles into Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Now, thanks to the increasingly anti-West conduct of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, none of these considerations remain relevant. These days, the Soviet Union might be no more, but Russia under Mr. Putin's autocratic rule is just as determined to undermine the West and its allies, and Mr. Erdogan, to judge by his successful summit with the Russian leader on October 22nd at the Black Sea city of Sochi, is proving to be Moscow's useful idiot in accomplishing these goals. Relations between Ankara and Moscow have improved considerably since Turkish warplanes shot down a Russian military jet that had strayed into Turkish airspace in 2015. Thanks to the close rapport that exists between Mr. Putin and Mr. Erdogan, Russia's Black Sea Fleet is able to operate freely to the extent that Russian warships based in the area were used to attack rebel forces in Syria fighting the regime of President Bashir al-Assad. Now, following the success of the Sochi talks, the two countries have agreed to work together on the post-conflict carve-up of Syria, one that's designed to bolster the interests of both Russia and Turkey at the expense of the Syrian Kurds, who were, until recently, regarded as vital allies of the U.S. and other NATO members states in the fight against ISIS. This means that Mr. Erdogan can persist with his offensive against the Syrian Kurds, who commanded the pro-Western Syrian Democratic Forces in the battle to destroy ISIS, as he seeks to establish what he calls a safe zone in northern Syria, which, to judge by the appalling casualties the Kurds are suffering at the hands of the Turkish military, is anything but safe. Nor is Mr. Erdogan's marriage of convenience with his Russian counterpart the first time the Turkish leader has acted in a way that's directly contrary to NATO's interests. Earlier in the summer, Mr. Erdogan drew heavy criticism from Washington after he did an arms deal with Moscow that enabled Ankara to purchase Russia's S-400 anti-aircraft missile system, which was specifically designed to shoot down NATO warplanes. The Trump administration responded by saying it would exclude Turkey from the F-35 stealth fighter program. At a time when NATO is reconfiguring its resources to deal with the threat Russia poses to European security, from protecting the Baltic states from Russian aggression to dealing with cyber attacks, the cozy relationship that Mr. Erdogan has embarked upon with Moscow can hardly be said to be in NATO's interests. The time has come, therefore, for the alliance to give serious consideration about whether Ankara should be allowed to retain its NATO membership, or whether to abandon Turkey to pursue its pro-Russian stance. A number of prominent Republicans, such as U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, have already called for Turkey's suspension from the alliance, and he's been the driving force behind attempts in Congress to impose sanctions against Ankara over its treatment of the Syrian Kurds. Now the time has come for other NATO member states to weigh up whether it really is in their interest to allow the alliance's only Muslim state to retain its membership. In the past, it has been argued that ending Turkey's association with NATO would be a gift to Mr. Putin, who would like to see nothing more than the NATO alliance collapse. There is, through a contrary argument to be made, namely that the alliance is already being weakened by allowing Turkey to retain its membership, while at the same time pursuing policies which are directly opposed to NATO's interests. Consequently, to my mind, NATO would be far stronger and better equipped to deal with its adversaries if it did not have to contend with a fifth column state like Turkey operating within its ranks. Our next story. IDF chief warns precarious security situation in the north could lead to conflict. With a stark warning of potential conflict, IDF Chief of Staff Aviv Kohavi unveils a multi-year plan to make the Israeli military deadlier, faster, better trained, and more capable of defending the Jewish state against the threats facing it today. In the northern and southern arenas, the situation is tense and precarious and poised to deteriorate into a conflict despite the fact that our enemies are not interested in war. In light of this, the IDF has been in an accelerated process of preparation, Kohavi says in a briefing to reporters. The plan, dubbed Momentum, or Tenafu in Hebrew, will see huge amounts of investment in developing the Israel Defense Forces arsenals, including increasing its collection of mid-sized drones, obtaining large numbers of precision-guided missiles from the United States, and purchasing additional air defense batteries. Despite the weighty price tag of the Momentum multi-year plan, the IDF refuses to comment on how it planned to pay for these new weapons and defense systems. Kohavi's plan will formally go into effect on January 1st of 2020, but the IDF plans to put into place some of the proposals before then. The IDF chief says the primary threat facing Israel comes from Iran along Israel's northern borders. The central strategic threat of the State of Israel lies in the northern arena, with the entrenchment of Iranian and other forces in Syria, and with the Hezbollah terrorist group precision missile project. Kohavi says, referring to any effort by the Iran-backed Lebanese militia to develop highly accurate long-range projectiles. Both of these cases are efforts led by Iran using the territory of countries with severely limited governance, he says. Kohavi specifically refers to the case of Lebanon, where Iran's ally Hezbollah is widely seen as being in control of the government despite technically having a small parliamentary presence. For years, Hezbollah has taken the state of Lebanon hostage. It built an army of its own, and it's one that dictates the security policy, the Army chief says. Our next story. Russia steps up its presence in northeast Syria after the Turkey deal, contributed by The Guardian. Russian troops have expanded their presence across northeastern Syria, the result of an agreement between Ankara and Moscow that should end Turkey's attack on Kurdish-led forces at the price of ending the Kurds' dreams of local autonomy. Syria and Russian media show footage of Russian military police vehicles on the outskirts of the important towns of Manbij and Kobani on Wednesday, one day after the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met Vladimir Putin in Sochi. A statement carried on Russian Interfax agency said Russian patrols had already begun inside Manbij, a town that until 2 weeks ago was a key U.S. base in the region. The deal was hailed as a big success by Donald Trump, although his critics say it cements Russia's role as prime power broker in the Middle East after the U.S. president's announcements that American special forces would withdraw from the area. Turkish troops, allied Syrian rebel proxies, the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, and soldiers belonging to the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad are now all present in the border zone, with Russia the only negotiating force between them. The talks on Tuesday between Erdogan and the Russian president defined the contours of Turkey's long-proposed border safe zone. Turkish troops in the area seized since the offensive began on October 9th will remain in situation, and Russian soldiers and the Syrian army will control the rest of the frontier. Moscow and Damascus will supervise the removal of Kurdish fighters and weaponry to the depth of 18 miles from their current positions on the border before the 26th of October, after which joint Russian-Turkish patrols will begin across the entire border area to a depth of 6 miles, with the exception of the de facto Kurdish capital, Kamishli. On Wednesday, the Russian Ministry of Defense published a map showing 15 planned border observation posts that will be manned by the Syrian regime. The deal, in effect, redraws the map of northern Syria and ends 5 years of semi-autonomy carved out by the local Kurdish administration and its military forces after Kurdish officials reached an agreement with Assad, their former enemy, for military reinforcements to fend off the Turkish attack. However, the fate of local military councils set up by the SDF in border towns previously under the control, and what happens to the FDS non-Kurdish units remains unclear. The SDF and Kurdish politicians are yet to comment on the Sochi deal. It's believed that they will retain control of the approximately 90,000 men, women, and children with links to the Islamic State being held in Kurdish-run prisons and detention camps. Turkish officials, including Erdogan, threatened on Wednesday that Ankara would resume the offensive if neither Russia nor the U.S. guaranteed the total withdrawal of Kurdish forces and fighters from the border region. Erdogan asked Putin what would happen if the People's Protection Units, the largest and most important unit within the SDF, put on Syrian army uniforms in order to stay in the border area, according to Hurriyet newspaper. Ankara says the YPG is indistinguishable from the outlaw Kurdistan Workers' Party, which has waged an insurgency against the Turkish state for decades. Erdogan said Putin responded by saying he would not let that happen. The border towns of Ras Al Ain and Tel Abyad, which have experienced fierce fighting, remained quiet on Wednesday, one day after a separate, poorly observed U.S.-brokered ceasefire expired. Trump tweeted, "Safe zone created. Ceasefire has held and combat missions have ended. Kurds are safe and have worked very nicely with us. Captured ISIS prisoners secured." Erdogan is scheduled to visit the White House next month. The deal was greeted more cautiously by the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who said the need for a political solution in northeast Syria would be discussed by defense ministers in Brussels on Thursday. At least 120 Syrians have died and 176,000 people have fled their homes over the last 2 weeks of violence, with 20 Turkish civilian deaths on the other side of the border. And that, my friends, is this week's edition of Revealing Prophecy. This program, along with Revealing the Bible, are only available after they air through the Biblical Truth Library. I want to encourage you to visit ignitinganation.com and sign up for our weekly newsletter and check out the Biblical Truth Library. Follow us online through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can catch up on over 1,400 interviews and never miss any of our great guests. Your comments and questions are always welcome, and we may include your answer in the next edition of the newsletter. Don't forget our regular live broadcasts are Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Until we see you right back here tomorrow for the next edition of Revealing the Truth, we thank you for watching and bid you shalom.